Welcome everyone to our webinar on this topic Tuesday. We're excited that you are joining us. We've got some great presenters that are going to share their expertise and wisdom around supporting marginalized students in the college transition process. So let's go ahead and get started. As everyone is joining, we have a little bit of housekeeping to remind you. During the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat box to communicate directly with the panelists. There may be some dialogue that we want to engage you with, and so that feedback can be put in the chat box. The other box that you see at the bottom of your screen is the Q&A. If you have questions specific to the content that's being delivered by the presenter, please put that in the Q&A box, and those will be answered either live or with typed answer questions throughout the presentation. We're excited that you're joining us today. And as our friends join and get settled into this webinar, we have a poll question to engage everyone in the audience. So the question is, according to the Lumina Foundation's Stronger Nation report in 2020, the post-secondary attainment by race and ethnic group is lowest for what group of students in Mississippi? Let me launch that poll for everybody. Give everyone a few minutes to submit their answers. All right, give everybody about 5 more seconds to answer this, and then we will get started with the formal part of the webinar. Okay. So as you can see, we have American, and we had 44% that said Hispanic Latinos and 6% that said American Indians. The answer is actually Hispanic Latinos. And this report this data is from 2020, but there was, as of the end of last week, released a new report based on 2022 data. So if you're interested in digging into this more, understanding the attainment, if you've heard about it, 655, which is the goal for Mississippi when it comes to the attainment rate, it's really good information that you can dig in not only onto the specific race and ethnic groups, but you can do it by county across the state and dig in and see what that looks like by age, race, and ethnicity. And so looking at it at a much deeper level. All right, Shannon, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Glad that you're here with us today. So welcome to the webinar. I'm Shannon Grinsley, the Assistant Director of Training and Counselor Outreach for the Woodward-Hines Education Foundation and the Get to College program. We are recording today's session and will send a link to anyone who is registered. For those watching the recording, today's date is February the 7th, 2023, and the material in this webinar is current through the 22-23 school year. In today's session, supporting marginalized students in college, you will hear from a panel that will share best practices and use case studies for working with 3 different marginalized students throughout their college process. I will now share a little background on Get to College and a few logistics about the webinar before we get started. Get to College is a nonprofit program of the Woodward-Hines Education Foundation. We have 3 centers in Mississippi, one in Jackson, one in Ocean Springs, and one in South Haven. And we help parents, students, and high school counselors with all aspects of the college planning and financial aid process. And all of our services are completely free. In our centers, we offer personalized college counseling appointments where we can help students know when to apply for admission and scholarship, help fill out their FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and advise on things such as essay writing and interviewing. As we mentioned earlier during the webinar, we cannot see or hear you, but we do ask that you ask us questions at any time through the chat or through the messenger. Kirsten Dufour will be monitoring and replying to all the Q&A today, and we will have time for that live Q&A with the presenters at the end. But as I said earlier, please feel free to message your questions at any time. I would now like to introduce our guest speakers for the day. First, we have Katie McBride. Katie provides leadership to the advising and coaching team within the Student Success Center at Loyola University in New Orleans. Her goal for the team is to ensure that they provide students with one-on-one guidance and interventions to increase their likelihood of retention and success within the university and the higher education system. These interventions take various forms and address the needs of a diverse and unique student body, from course selection to understanding how to effectively plan the schedule of the young adult. The advising and coaching team seeks to support students in their pursuit of academic goals. Prior to joining the staff at Loyola, Katie served in a variety of roles at the University of Southern Mississippi, including work in admission, campus visits, student outreach and support, and success coaching. She received a Juris Doctorate from Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she focused on civil rights and health law, and she also has a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern Mississippi. Our second presenter is Sarah Dill. Sarah is a professional school counselor in the Clinton Public School District. She is a graduate of the University of Mississippi and the University of Alabama's Counselor Education Departments. This is her 8th year working at Clinton High School. Our last presenter is Kimberly Trosclair. Kimberly is the director of the Gulf Coast Get to College Center. She has a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Southern Mississippi, a master's degree in school counseling from the University of Southern Mississippi, and a specialist degree in psychometry from Jackson State University. As a lifelong resident of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Kimberly always brings the hospitality and a genuine sense of welcoming to the Get to College staff. Kimberly enjoys traveling, spending time with her family, and being on the water. Ladies, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Hey guys, I'm Sarah Dill, and our first student that we're going to be talking about today is Mary. Mary is a 17-year-old high school junior, and she's the first person in her family on track to go to college. She has a 2.9 high school GPA, and she has taken the ACT one time and received a 19 composite score. Mary also has dyslexia. And she has an accommodation plan to help her with dyslexia in her classroom and on testing. She's interested in attending college outside of the state of Mississippi, but has severe anxiety when thinking about moving away from home and the supports that she has there. She's very close to qualifying for a HELP grant and could probably use some help signing up for the ACT again and choosing classes her senior year to increase her GPA. So there's quite a few resources available for Mary. One of the things that you could do in high school to help Mary on our next slide is to help Mary get testing accommodations in order to get some extra time on the ACT. It's likely that with additional time and it being her second time to take the test that she could increase her score. That might also help with some of her anxiety. Mary, as a high school person, it would also be helpful to advise Mary to look at disability services whenever she is looking at colleges, helping to explain what potential accommodations could be available, and even just where on campuses, college campuses, to look for those kinds of accommodations. This is probably the first time in Mary's life that the information has not just naturally progressed from school to school. You can also help her find colleges that do not require testing, and kind of explaining what that would mean for colleges, sometimes for admission, the ACT may not be required, but for scholarship purposes, it may be. And so maybe finding schools that might not rely as much on the ACT might be a helpful fit for Mary. When Mary gets to the university or the college that she chooses, she can get some more information about the counseling center on the college campus. She can also work with that college's student disability center in order to get the kind of help that she needs academically. And lastly, she could look into college scholarships that might be private, that might have some different requirements that might fit her needs better. Does anyone have any questions about Mary? Or any ideas on if you've worked with a student like Mary?
Is it okay if I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So we work really closely with the Disability Services Office here at Loyola. And I think one thing for any student to consider, and would be great advice for a high school counselor to give, is to get in contact with the Disability Services Office over the summer before they start school. What we see with a lot of students is because of the documentation that's required, it can take a little bit of time to get the accommodations that students need. So if they reach out early on in the summer before classes even start, they're going to start ahead of all of the other students and have those accommodations and documentation that they need to give to their professors on the first day of class. And we've worked with a number of students that's been really impactful for.
Sarah or Katie, can I ask a question here just for clarification? So I've worked with some students who have an IEP or a 504 in the past. Do you know, is there a difference on the college side when it comes to accommodations, and what does that look like between the two?
So the documentation is different at the college level, and I can't tell you the specifics because I don't work with the documentation process, but there are different documents that are required. Usually it is additional documentation from the healthcare provider that has either diagnosed the student or been providing services for the student. A new trend in disability services, though, is being able to offer accommodations based on self-reporting. So there are certain kinds of accommodations that some institutions are now offering just based on an interview with the student. So that's another great reason to get in contact with the Disability Services offices sooner rather than later, because you can find out exactly what the university you're attending requires, and go ahead and get that process started. Doctors, as we know, are very, very busy people, and it can sometimes take a couple of tries to get the additional documentation that office is looking for.
We also did a topic Tuesday back in December that focused solely on the process during high school and then the transition to college. And that is going to be on our YouTube channel if you want to go back and resource all of that as well. That was a very helpful resource as well, if those of you listening missed that December topic Tuesday. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions about Mary, we will move on to Katie's student.
Yeah, so my student is Erin. Erin is a first-generation transgender female. Coming out of high school, Erin has a 3.25 GPA and a 20 on the ACT. Erin has also received the full Pell Grant. Erin has chosen to attend a university out of state, and so they were not eligible for in-state aid in the state of Mississippi. So coming into college, Erin was really interested in living learning communities, especially for the first generation student population. But because of their gender identity, there were questions about residence halls, where Erin would be able to live, what kind of accommodations housing and residence life would offer for a transgender student. Erin did perform well academically during her first year, but was not eligible for additional merit scholarships at the university because of her ACT score. Not a bad score, just didn't quite meet what the university was looking for. This left Erin with a balance both for her fall and spring semester. So even receiving the maximum Pell Grant, this created a real barrier for her as she tried to enroll both going from the fall into the spring semester of her freshman year, and then going from the spring semester of her freshman year into the fall of her sophomore year. So it was really hard for her to get enrolled because she needed to pay down that balance. So in thinking about Erin's situation, there are resources on both sides, both at the high school level and the college level, that would be probably really important for her on the next slide. One thing to think about as a high school counselor, just creating your office as a safe space. So letting students know that they can come in and talk to you about these concerns. There are, just little symbols or stickers, ally representation that you can put up to let students know that there's a safe space for them to come in. But also it can be helpful to just research additional resources on allyship. You may be seeing more and more of these students coming forward and disclosing and sharing this information and concerns that they have about their identity. We see that with this generation. They're much more comfortable talking about these things. And so if you want to make sure that you have some resources, there's some listed here that can be really helpful to kind of introduce you. I am not an expert in this field either. And so going through and familiarizing myself with ways to be supportive and an ally for students has been a big part of my own professional development. So these are some resources that I've used that I know others have used. If you have additional resources that you have found helpful, please feel free to drop that in the chat or the Q&A. In some ways, you guys are very much the experts because you're on the forefront of these conversations with high school students every day. When it comes to university resources, we know that Erin is a first-gen student, and so encouraging first-gen students to always look for TRIO programs. TRIO is a federally funded program for students who are first-gen, low income, or have a documented disability, and they have separate support and resources that they can offer to first-gen students specifically, and in some cases, additional financial aid. And so while Erin wasn't eligible for institutional aid, they were eligible for some additional federal aid through TRIO. And so getting those students to know what this resource is great. Also connecting students or encouraging the students to connect with LGBTQ resources on campus. Most universities these days provide ally training and also have a resource office and student organizations for these particular communities. It can be great help in kind of helping the students find a community, feel supported on campus, but also developing their own personal advocacy and their identity. And that could be really important. Living learning communities, also a great way to build relationships for students. Main thing here is to connect those students with housing and residence life because there are different policies. So for example, this student is a student that I actually worked with at University of Southern Mississippi, and they accommodated students based on requests, based on their personal gender identity. And so because Erin identified as female and communicated that in a public manner and was comfortable living with females, they were able to pair Erin up with a friend who's also female, and they were able to live in the residence halls together. And so it's really important for the student to kind of do some of that personal advocacy work. Again, it can be very scary, but you can practice having those conversations with the student so they get comfortable asking those kinds of questions. And then for resources, finances, you've got complicated financial situations for out-of-state students. One of the things that we really encourage students to look into is resources around gap grants and scholarships. Sometimes these are not scholarships that you see in a general freshman, scholarship. chart or application, but there are offices that offer additional financial aid. We happened to have at the time a scholarship that started sophomore year that we were able to, Aaron applied for it. It started off as a sophomore developmental program. And then if you continue your junior and senior year, you get a scholarship to serve as a mentor for those students. So we had some gap grants for freshmen. Oftentimes, gap grants are based on income and need. So as a Pell eligible student, Erin was eligible for some additional aid in her freshman year, helped her pay off those balances. It didn't cover everything, but it helped. And then getting her into that scholarship program was also a key thing. So it's all about personal advocacy. Erin came to us and said, this is what I'm struggling. This is what I need. And so knowing that those are resources and introducing them to students early on as a high school counselor can be really impactful, getting them to go and ask those questions.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions or comments for Katie about her student? I'll let y'all think about that for a minute. We did have someone, Nicole, typed in the chat that she had a statement about the ADA services on college campuses. She said, is it true that the student should meet with the ADA office prior to the starting semester, but also that someone follows the student to ensure they're being serviced throughout the semester? And y'all want to take that?
I don't know as far as like following a student. Again, it's probably going to depend a little bit on the institution and the services that they provide. So for example, here at Loyola, there's a team, there's an office. Each student that gets accommodations has a, we call it the Office of Accessible Education. So each student has a counselor in accessible education that they can meet with. If they're experiencing any issues or have concerns about their accommodations, but it's not like they're in communication with them. It's like a kind of like a casework process. I'm not sure entirely what you're asking about, like it's following, like they're not going around with them or anything like that. But many of those students come back and see their counselor several times throughout the semester.
It's been our experience to talk to students and encourage them to self-advocate. That's probably the biggest thing that we do with our students that are seniors who have some kind of accommodation plan, would be to remind them that they don't have these built-in supports in the same way, and that they really do have to advocate for themselves. And if a teacher or a professor rather is not giving them the accommodations that they are supposed to have, like encouraging them to follow up, whether that means refusing to, I don't want to say refusing to take an exam, but postponing or waiting until those accommodations can be given in accordance with the plan that they have at the college. But it really does depend, from my experience, it does depend on what school they go to and just the procedures that they have in place at that college.
Thank you. See any more? I don't see any more questions. Do you, Kirsten?
I do have one question that is just a question that maybe Katie or Sarah, that y'all could both handle from the college's side as well as the high school side. The student scenario that we see here, it's very sensitive. It's obviously very
personal, and we've talked a lot about
for the accommodation piece in the previous example, but for this student that Katie, you mentioned about having to do some early awareness or self-awareness and advocacy for it. How would you all handle or advise those educators that are on this call
about being able to address this
very sensitive topic with their students, and how they can, if they're not maybe ready to fully disclose it, how they can navigate this process as they transition from high school into that college setting?
So, yeah, it is a hard thing to do. And I'll be honest, in the case of Aaron, like Aaron was very much out and sharing this identity. And so that made these conversations much easier. I think, again, resources are really helpful. But I also think just understanding that you really just have to be empathetic. Like, there are going to be signs, and there are probably going to be, before the student comes out and says, I'm gay, I'm transgender, before they say those things explicitly, they may allude to them. And so you're going to have to kind of look for and listen for those kinds of things coming from the student, and then just be really gentle in the questions that you ask. And the concerns, use the same language that they use, so you're not pushing them beyond what they're comfortable disclosing. And let them know that you're asking these questions because you're trying to advocate for them and make sure that they have access to the resources that they need. Given the current political environment around this issue, would certainly understand any student being really uncomfortable sharing this information. And so you really just, the best thing I can tell you to do is be empathetic, be kind, be gentle, and let the student share with you what they're comfortable sharing, and then make some suggestions and some resources based on that. I think over time that builds trust, and more than likely that student is going to open up and be willing to share a little bit more as they continue the process with you.
At the high school level, I think as school counselors, our biggest thing is to be non-judgmental. And I think that our students are aware, in addition to the fact that we do have like a GSA group for our students and faculty. I think they're very aware of who they feel comfortable sharing with. And then if they are in classes with people who are not teachers, who are not as open or accepting, a lot of times they'll come and we can facilitate that conversation if they can express to talk to, kind of prime the conversation and talk to that teacher. And most of our teachers are great with this, and they want to be sensitive. And I think Katie's right. I think they're maybe not always sure how to approach that conversation. So sometimes we will just prime them for that. And
All right. Sarah froze there for me, at least. Everybody else too? Oh. Yeah. Looks like she's moving again. Anything else, Sarah? Okay. All right. Well, we will move on then to Kimberly's student, James.
Hello, everyone. So James, here is his scenario. He is an incarcerated student. Currently, James is 24 years old. He has a high school diploma. James has been notified through his facility that he is eligible to begin taking some college coursework while he is incarcerated. While he wonders how he will pay for it, he decides he wants to take advantage of this opportunity and hopefully begin in the fall of 2023. He did graduate from a Mississippi high school, and he feels pretty confident that he could have a family member or someone at the facility help him to obtain that high school transcript. In addition, he has some faculty members at his facility who have helped him apply and gain admission into the local community college. He's just really, the question for James is, how will I receive support to do this, and how will I even pay for this? So before we even look at resources or what opportunities James might have, I do want to give you some background information. In 2020, a federal law was passed that lifted the 26-year ban on incarcerated students being eligible for a federal Pell Grant. So beginning in July of 2023, incarcerated individuals will be eligible for a federal Pell Grant. However, there's a caveat here. I will tell you, this is very new. Many individuals are trying to figure this out and still make sure this happens. So in order for any student to participate in Pell Grants while incarcerated, they actually have to be enrolled in an eligible prison education program, meaning that college that is going to offer these classes to the incarcerated student, they had to apply and be approved through Mississippi Department of Corrections and also SACS. So there's an accreditation process that the college must go through with both of them. Currently, I can tell you that MDOC is still developing that application for the prison education programs. It has not quite been finalized yet. So all of this is sort of very new. SACS is also developing the process for the prison education plans. So we don't look for those to be approved by the Board of Trustees, most probably until the meeting in June is what we are hearing currently. So there still is some process here. I can't guarantee that these students will be eligible to go immediately July 23rd. But we're moving in that direction, and there's a lot of individuals talking at this point, which I think is great because there's definitely a process for this. I will tell you that Get to College had a fabulous opportunity to work with Stone County Regional Facility as well as the George County Regional Facility. Our coast office did. We were approached by Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College to actually partner with them in what was called Second Chance Pell. The federal government decided to initiate this program to a select few. They had to apply to be accepted into this trial program. And basically what they did, it was a trial run to test students and to test the process and see if this would work for the colleges. So we did have some Mississippi colleges participate in Second Chance Pell that did allow incarcerated students to begin using Pell Grant funds. We, as Get to College, would actually zoom in to the facilities, to the two facilities that I worked with, and complete FAFSAs for the incarcerated students. We did see some hiccups or some potential problems that really we have to think about moving forward if Pell Grants are opening up to all with that prison education program. Number one, I mentioned is the transcripts. So if you are a high school counselor, this may be something that you begin to see, as students will need that transcript to be accepted into whichever university is hosting that program. Mississippi Gulf Coast saw some huge benefits for these students. Traditionally, students could take psychology, sociology, English Comp 1 and 2, World Civ. They could also take, there was a technical math, also a technical writing. So those were really the traditional courses that they were offering to the students who participated in the Second Chance Pell program. That program has now phased out since we are moving into now July of 2023, where incarcerated students have the opportunity to participate in these programs. So I just wanted to kind of touch base and talk about some of the issues we saw that were related to the high school side when it came to resources for the students. Number one is these incarcerated students must meet the admissions requirements that the college has for students. This posed a little bit of a problem when the transcripts had to come from an out-of-state high school. The other piece that we encountered, Gulf Coast had an adult education faculty member housed at those two facilities that I worked with. So we actually had a body there who we could talk to, who could help us, who could help the student with admission. So I have to say that was a huge plus. Some of the other, we've spoken with the consortium surrounding this movement. Some of the other universities did not necessarily have a physical body at the facility. And so that did slow that process down a little bit. So I think for high school counselors, just knowing this is coming and a request for a transcript could be made is going to be important. Of course, the student also has to complete the FAFSA. I will mention that technology is critical for this to happen. Some facilities will not allow textbooks, some do. Some facilities had laptops because the colleges would provide them, but some facilities did not agree to allow the student to have the online learning. So you can see it differed, the opportunities for these students, it differed from facility to facility. And the other thing was a student could be incarcerated at one facility and then moved, and the new facility may not have been a part of Second Chance Pell at the time, so that continuation could not happen. So a lot of dialogue and discussion here surrounding access for the students and what they could actually partake in. I will tell you, learning supports, as you can imagine, for incarcerated students is a little difficult. They don't have the learning labs or access to those resources that someone on campus or even an online student who could go to campus would receive. So again, I have to go back to having that adult ed person there was a huge bonus for the students. Just in filing the FAFSA as well, because many of the students did not have access to email. And of course, they don't have a cell phone. So verifying that FSA ID, that person was our link. And so those were the key resources for the students that we worked with in Second Chance Pell, and pieces that we're thinking about moving forward as this begins to open up. Another issue, and some of you may have already encountered this or thinking about this, we have some students who actually they started college, had some classes under their belt, and maybe then became incarcerated a year later, and they're trying to now get a transcript. Some of those students still owe the college money, and so a transcript will not be released at that point until it's paid. So you can see it, there are instances where things will arise that may stop a student until they can get things cleared up. So it really is not, okay, everyone is going to be eligible for Pell. The admission standards still stay the same. Transcript requests still stay the same. So we really have to be able to work through those kinks with each student in order for this to happen.
Thank you, Kimberly. Any questions about our student, James? A lot of things still up in the air, Kimberly, but thank you.
It is. A lot of things are up in the air. I think a lot of dialogue nationally is taking place. WEF and Get to College, we're very fortunate to attend the consortium meeting where we actually heard from some former incarcerated individuals from California who were at a facility that allowed them, believe it or not, to finish a bachelor's degree. And hearing now what they're doing in their career path and how they're mentoring others was pretty powerful. And so to see that it can be done and how it really can change that trajectory for someone it's just heartwarming. So I think just to know it's coming, but I will tell you, it's in the early phases right now.
All right. Seeing any questions, Kirsten? I'm not seeing any on this end.
No questions so far. If anyone has questions, if you'll use the Q&A feature, our panelists will answer those, or if you have any insight to add on any of these marginalized student populations, you can drop that in the chat. We'd love to highlight that for the group that is here today.
We also have a resource sheet. There was a QR code on this, but I realized this morning that the QR code was no longer working. So we'll try to email you all that resource sheet as well, those that have registered. So I'll go ahead and
One thing,
close.
Shannon,
Okay.
Shannon, one thing I wanted to mention for high school counselors. So as you can imagine, if an incarcerated student needs a transcript, they can't use the phone and they can't email usually. So if there's someone at the facility that is helping them, normally that's who would reach out to the high school or help this student. So I don't know what each high school process is to request a transcript for former students. Do they have to come in? Can someone pick up the form? Is it online? Those are just things I'm thinking in Mississippi, not even out of state yet, that might cause a block or prolong the process for students. So just something to continue thinking about or discussing how that process might be coming about.
Absolutely. This presentation is all about access and how we can think about helping our students get access and be successful. So for sure. All right. Well, I hope everyone found this presentation helpful as you work to support marginalized students on their journey to and through college. We will email you this recording for the webinar in the next couple of days, and we'll also post it on our YouTube channel. We would appreciate it if you would complete the short survey that will automatically pop up at the end of this meeting. Please fill it out and give us feedback on today's webinar so that we can keep improving. All right, so as we start to close out our school year, we have 3 Topic Tuesday sessions left. Stay tuned for our next Topic Tuesday, which will be Tuesday, March the 7th. Please note that this next Topic Tuesday will actually be a Zoom meeting instead of a webinar. The topic for this meeting will be diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we will have 2 phenomenal speakers that I promise you will not want to miss. I heard them speak in August, and it's powerful and it's life-changing. So please join in, tell all your colleagues, your friends, whoever. We got 500 seats in it, so y'all come on. We will continue this webinar series throughout the spring semester. If you participate in 5 webinars, then you'll have the opportunity to apply for 0.5 CEUs. And if you've participated in all 10 webinars over the fall and spring, you will have the opportunity to apply for 1 full CEU. All of the remaining webinars are listed on this slide, and you can register for these slides on our Get to College website. They're listed under the Educator tab and then choose Professional Development. While you're there registering, please check out all the other resources for you and your students listed under the Educator tab. There's lots of those to choose from for you there. Again, as we're winding down the school year, we have 1 opportunity left for college access training, and that is going to be next week, Wednesday, February 15th, from 9 to 11 a.m., and that will be virtual. And this training will cover basically everything from start to finish, how a student would apply to schools, the types of financial aid, and how we work to get our students to college. So join in for that if you can. And then if you're a CCR teacher or know a CCR teacher, we have 2 CCR teacher chats left for the spring, February 22nd and March 29th. And these are always from 3:30 to 4:15 virtually. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we really hope to see everyone in March for that Zoom meeting where we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we hope to see you then. And we hope that everyone has a great day.